Madison wrote that the executive branch is the branch most prone to war. Therefore, the Constitution, with studied care, granted that power or vested that power in the legislature. In no way did they argue that Article 2 was unlimited authority to commence, initiate, or engage in war at all. In fact, most of the Founding Fathers would disagree with you on saying that Article 2 gives the president power to commence in war. To defend the country under imminent attack, to execute the war once the war is initiated. The initiation of war is congressional duty, not the president's at all. Even the War Powers Act, a couple centuries later, nobody reports this. It has a reporting requirement in there, but it also says in another section that this is a reporting requirement for things that are either imminent attack or authorized war. There's nothing in the War Powers Act about unauthorized war because we're not supposed to be doing it. So I agree completely with the authors of this that we should be doing something. I applaud their motives. I don't question their motives, but I do doubt that this will change any of our military interventions as to what we are doing. I want to know, are we going to limit the president's power? Are we going to take back our power? I think a 5-year sunset is, and I don't mean to be mean, but it's essentially nothing. I mean, we've had millions of people die in 5-year wars before, so I think it's virtually meaningless. As far as the geographic limit on there, also virtually meaningless. If you look at associated forces, part of or substantially supports al-Qaeda, the Taliban, or the Islamic State. Well, just the Islamic State's in 32 countries right now. I mean, you add in Taliban and you add in al-Qaeda, we're probably at least 50 or 60 countries. I'm not voting to go to war in 50 or 60 countries. Or if we're going to limit something, let's have a debate. If we're going to just simply pass something to say we passed something, but it's not limiting, I mean, one of our testimonies today says basically, well, you got all the Article 2 and it'd just be nice. Kind of just be nice to have an AUMF. No, it wouldn't be nice. That's the Constitution. There's supposed to be no war without an AUMF. We have been illegally at war for a long time now. This is illegal war at this point. So when we look at this and we ask ourselves, what are we doing here? Are we going to limit the power? Are we going to eliminate the duration of the war? We're going to identify our enemy. But the 9/11 proclamation, over and over again, people say associated forces as if that's in the document. That's not even in the document. The document, as Senator Cardin said, was very, very specific to 9/11. And we've had people just saying you can do anything you want now for 15 years. Then there's the practical question. The practical question is doing anything you want, killing every perceived enemy and every perceived leader of chieftain of 5 people in some misbegotten village, is it helping? Are we going to defeat an ideology by killing people? I was all for going after the people after 9/11. I would have voted for that. But I don't think war in Yemen is necessarily helping us. I don't think the man raid in Yemen made us safer. In fact, and I don't blame our soldiers for this. Look, I've got members of my family that are active duty. They do what they're told. They're brave young men and women. But, when they killed 4 or 5 al-Qaeda people in a village, but we also kill their wives and children, and I'm not saying we intentionally do it. They're probably firing at us. They're in the middle of the firefight. But is it better? Do we have less terrorists now or more? We killed 5. Well, what do you think happens in that village and surrounding that village for decades? For 100 years, they'll be talking about the time the Americans came and killed the people and killed our women and children. For 100 years, they're going to be talking about the Saudis dropping bombs on a funeral procession. That does not go away. These people remember the Battle of Karbala in 680 AD. They have long memories. One of my favorite quotes is, you have all the watches, but we have all the time. They're just going to be there, and they will wait us out. But we're not going to feed terrorism by having war in 60-some-odd countries and dropping drones on everybody that we think in a village is of a radical ideology. We have to defend ourselves. But we should be much more specific than this, and I just say now I won't vote for something that doesn't limit the president's power, but simply gives a rubber stamp to what we are doing. And I would argue that our founding fathers did not agree with unlimited Article 2 authority. In fact, they thought Article 2 was virtually unlimited authority to execute an already initiated war. If you look at every founding father, whether it's Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, every one of them believed that the power to initiate war was Congress's. You could repel imminent attack, even against the Barbary pirates. It was an imminent attack and keeping war. But Jefferson worried that he needed to come back, and he actually did come back very quickly, within a few months, and they did vote on authorizing that activity. But that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about repelling attackers in the open seas, which I'm for. We're not talking about a limited thing. We're talking about worldwide war. And I think this authorization will not limit that in any way. I have no question. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Paul, would you yield to a question? Absolutely. All right. And this, This is not a belligerent question. Indeed, I think that your comments are exactly the kind of robust debate that Congress needs to do and the American people need to do, and that the Founding Fathers intended when they put those provisions in there. And I'd ask if you would respond. And again, this is not a belligerent question, but there are people who argue in response to your allegations that, well, what we're doing is illegal. They would argue that, well, look, Congress has to authorize military force. There's no exact way they have to do it, and one of the ways they can do it is by appropriating funds for it, thereby giving it the okay. So there are people who make that argument. How would you respond to that? And again, this is not a belligerent question. It's part.
I appreciate the question. I think it goes to the heart of the matter. There are two ways you can initiate war. You initiate it through an authorization and then through funding. You can discontinue funding. That's one way of ending it, but you're trying then to end something if it was never initiated. So, for example, currently we have a war never initiated by Congress, and you would be trying to end it by funding. I would argue that practically it's very difficult to stop funding because the argument will be, like I say, I've got active duty. I have active members of my family over there. Do I want to stop funding them in the middle of their battle? So it is much more difficult that way, but I think the debate was intended to be at the beginning before we began funding a war. And even during Vietnam, the most acrimonious our country has probably been in terms of war, other than the Civil War. I think in the end, I think in the very end, we still didn't even defund it. We might have defunded it after people had left Vietnam, but we never voted defund even a very unpopular war. So for practical purposes, I would say, and for constitutional purposes, our job is before we get to the funding part.